So welcome to this seminar. Our topic today is on war crimes and accountability, and we'll focus on the challenges of the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, in investigating allegations of war crimes in Afghanistan. And this is a particularly important topic in the light of the new executive order signed by the US President to impose sanctions on individuals associated with the ICC. So with us today, we have our panelists. We have Ehsan Qaane, who is the Country Director for Afghanistan Analysts Network and is currently writing a thesis on the International Criminal Court and Afghanistan for his Master's in Law. Worked at the ICC in The Hague for 6 months as a visiting professional, and he co-authored the handbook on Transitional Justice, which is a training manual for civil society and the first of its kind to be written by and for Afghans. We also have Jennifer Trahan, who is a clinical professor at NYU Center for Global Affairs, where she directs the concentration in international law and human rights. She holds various positions with the American branch of the International Law Association, including as chair of the ICC Committee. She recently also served as an amicus curiae to the International Criminal Court on the appeal of the situation regarding Afghanistan. Third, we have Nasrina Bargzie, who is an Afghan-American attorney who practices in the United States and abroad. She spent her legal career specializing in complex business litigation, civil rights, and international human rights. She's also an expert in legal writing and research and was a lecturer in law at Stanford Law School. Nasrina works closely with the Afghan civil society on human rights and governance. So our first question is for Jennifer. I'd like to know what kind of war crimes the ICC will investigate in Afghanistan. What's the context of possible war crimes committed, and which parties will be investigated?
Sure. Thank you, Maya, and thank you for inviting me to speak. It's a pleasure, and thank you also to the CICC for their role in helping set this up. So looking at the statements by the offices of prosecutor, they're looking at 3 baskets of crimes: crimes by the Taliban, Afghan armed forces, and regarding US nationals. In terms of the Taliban, it's a long list of crimes against humanity and war crimes. The crimes against humanity include murder, imprisonment, or other severe deprivation of physical liberty, persecution, and including on gender grounds. A huge list of war crimes: murder, attacks against civilian population, against humanitarian personnel, intentionally directing attacks against protected objects, conscripting children under the age of 15, and killing or wounding treacherously a combatant adversary. Regarding Afghan authorities, it's basically torture and cruel treatment, outrages on personal dignity, and sexual violence. Regarding detention facilities, and it's similar for the US forces. The OTP notes they have reasonable basis to believe members of the US Armed Forces and CIA have committed acts of torture, cruel treatment, outrages on personal dignity, rape, and sexual violence against conflict-related detainees in the 2003-2004 period. And the prosecutor's office identifies not only Afghanistan, but other state parties, which we believe is a reference to secret prison sites in Poland, Romania, and Lithuania. Of course, Poland, Romania, Lithuania, and Afghanistan all being ICC state parties.
Would Ehsan like to comment on this as well, perhaps about the Afghan and ICC relationship?
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be a part of this important discussion at this juncture of time. relationship between the ICC and Afghan government is going back to 1989, when the International Rome Conference was adopted, was held in July 1998, and the Rome Statute, the establishment document of the International Criminal Court, was approved by the participant there. That time, the current Afghan regime was not in place, but Afghan Mujahideen government was in power, which was internationally recognized. The Afghan Mujahideen government sent a delegation to the conference, and the delegation had some intervention related to the crime of aggression. Mujahideen fought against Suits for almost one decade and a half, and took power in 1992. It can help us to understand why they had some intervention in favor of crime of aggression that time. Also at that time, in 1998, the Mujahideen government was fighting with its rival, the Taliban, which was emerged in 1995, and the Mujahideen government believed that the Taliban was a group of Afghans and non-Afghans who were supported technically, financially, and militarily by Pakistan and other Khalij states like Saudi Arabia, and they believed that the Taliban was a kind of an agent in a proxy war. So they were supporting adding the crime of aggression in the Rome Statute. Also, the Mujahideen government, maybe they understood the content of the Rome Statute or not. I don't believe they understood everything, but they supported the notion of having an international criminal court at that time, and therefore they casted their vote in favor of the Rome Statute. 5 years later, in February 2003, the current Afghan regime, which was established in 2001 in Bonn conference in Germany by the support of the international community, including the UN and US, sent its membership request to the ICC, and the request was accepted by the ICC, and Afghanistan became a member of the ICC on 1st May of 2003, which means since that date, the ICC has jurisdiction over the Rome Statute crimes which have been committed on the territory of Afghanistan. Regardless who committed, it could be Afghan nations or it could be foreign nations like the US citizens who came in freedom of the US Army or CIA in Afghanistan. And for the first time in 2007, the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC opened its preliminary investigation related to Afghanistan situation. And this Afghanistan was in its preliminary investigation phase for almost 1 decade, till the prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, submitted her request to the Pretrial Chamber to have its authorization to open a full investigation in Afghanistan. In this 10 years period, the OTP published 6 annual reports related to the Afghanistan situation, which was published annually from 2001 to 2006. As I said, in 2017, the prosecutor submitted her application to the Pretrial Chamber for its authorization. And also in January 2018, the ICC, especially the registry, collected the views of Afghan victims related to what they are thinking about the ICC investigation. And fortunately, a high number of the Afghan victims and survivors by themselves or someone on behalf of them submitted forms to the ICC and said yes for the investigation. And then it goes to finally Pretrial Chamber came with the suggestion and reject the prosecutor in request and said the ICC does not have jurisdiction over the Afghanistan situation. Mainly they argued based on the interest of justice, which is itself a weak term in the ICC Rome Statute. Fortunately, in December last year, 2019, the appeal chambers reversed the pretrial chamber decision and gave an authorization to the prosecutor. However, between 2015 and 2017, I mean, after the prosecutor released her fifth annual report related to Afghanistan, and said that she has enough information or reasonable basis to believe that crimes, Rome Statute crimes, war crimes, and crimes against humanity occurred on Afghanistan territory or somehow related to the Afghan conflict in the other territory of state parties, which Jennifer already named them. I'm not going to name again. And also the OTP believes that Afghan government and the other parties like US has not domestically investigated those responsible for those crimes. So therefore, they are going imminently to make their decision to submit their application to the pretrial chamber for an authorization. This somehow provoked the Afghan government for the first time to take the ICC investigation serious. In January 2016, for the first time, the Afghan National Security Council, which was chaired by President Ashraf Ghani, had a meeting and discussed many topics, but two of them were more important. One, does the ICC investigation has any impact on the Afghan peace negotiation with Hekmatyar? That time, Afghan government was in a peace talk with Hekmatyar, who was and he is the leader of Hizb Islami. That time, Hizb Islami was an opponent or insurgent group fighting against the Afghan government and international troops, but not affiliated to the Taliban. The second topic was that to find out the opinion of the Afghan international partners who has military presence in Afghanistan, what they are thinking about the ICC investigation. So a committee was established as a result of this meeting, and the second Vice President, Sarwar Danish, was chairing that. And under his leadership, a technical committee, which was chaired by the Afghan Foreign Ministry, was established. They were collecting information about these two questions. And at the end of day, it's not really clear what the answer they have got from the international partners or from the others who are working on the peace talks. But Afghan government started for the first time direct communication with the ICC. Before 2015, for many times, the Office of the Prosecutor communicated with the Afghan government through the diplomatic channel, but never heard any response from the Afghan government. And since 2016, the Afghan government started direct communication with the OTP or with the ICC officials and sent at least 3 delegations to The Hague and talked directly with the ICC officials, including the president of the ICC and the prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda. And during these meetings, the Afghan government was saying that the Afghan government has willingness to investigate war crimes and crimes against humanity, but unfortunately does not have the capacity to do that. Therefore, the Afghan government requested time from the ICC by using this chance, the Afghan government can build its national capacity dealing with the national crimes and war crimes. However, these meetings between the ICC and Afghan government does not influence the OTP decision. And finally, Fatou Bensouda, the prosecutor, submitted her application to the pretrial chamber and then to the appeal chamber. After the decision of appeal chambers related to the Afghanistan situation, the Afghan government again tried to somehow stop the ICC investigation by submitting a different request using Article 18 of the Rome Statute, which is currently under discussion between the two parties.
Well, thank you for that. For a moment, I'd like to ask Nasrina if you could tell us about the ICC investigation in the context of how this may serve as an instrument of justice in the difficult reality for Afghans.
For organizing this, and thank you for this. and Jennifer and the team has been by. Thank you for that background on where we are. I think it's important to put what is going on with the ICC in the context of what has been happening in Afghanistan itself. So, this is a country that has been at war for 40 years. The ICC jurisdiction can cover everything, but it is an ongoing conflict that is a brutal one and for the people who are actually there. So the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission, by the Afghan Constitution, did a survey of the Afghan people in 2005, not too long after 9/11 and the events that precipitated the new government being formed. And they surveyed the Afghan people, and they asked them, they went across all provinces, they had they asked them, basic questions about what they wanted in terms of sort of looking at the violence that had erupted in the country across the then 25 years. And 95% of the Afghan people were in favor of something.
Could you just speak a little louder? It's a little bit difficult to hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
Try again.
Better?
I think better, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'll speak up. So, they went around and they talked with folks, and they found out that, solid 95% of people wanted truth finding, 88% wanted reparations. And as Ehsan John mentioned, when the ICC interacted with Afghan, when the outreaches in December 2017 and January 2018, people also responded pretty exuberantly that they did want something to actually happen in terms of an ICC investigation. But the reality is that didn't happen. What ended up happening is post-2005, the Afghan government entered into an amnesty agreement. And what we've basically seen since then is that the government consistently says that it wants to advance truth and justice, and it wants to advance accountability. But what often ends up happening is, in an effort to reduce the truth, which is understandable, they will enter into amnesty deals and they will enter into other agreements. But the result often is we continue in these cycles of violence on the ground. So what you end up having is, on the ground, you have effective impunity in the country. On the ground, you have a situation where people's lives are at risk daily. And what the ICC is saying, this is a legal process, and it's a legal mechanism that the Afghans have joined themselves on purpose, right? So this is a part of the law of Afghanistan. And in that way, it ends up being one of the instruments that could be utilized to actually move this country towards justice and accountability. And right now, given what's going on in the context of the peace negotiations, it's one of the only ones that's really available.
Thank you for that. I think what you're highlighting there is also not only the context, but the context of what makes this a challenging endeavor. And for that, I'd like to ask Ehsan, if you can tell us what the chances are of actually bringing those responsible to justice, and the challenges to this investigation.
Sure. So you're talking related to the ICC, not related to national prosecution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me start with the chances or opportunity to bring those responsible to justice, which is, of course, very limited. And of course, it's also not unexpected. Usually, if you're going back to the history of the ICC investigation, in every situation, the chances are already low, but the chances are already high. Afghanistan is not exceptional. Of course, in Afghanistan, the challenges would be much more higher because at least one of the international superpower is involved in the case. Let me start with the opportunities. As Nasrina John also mentioned, and I also said that when the Office of the Registry of the ICC collected the views of victims about the ICC investigation. There was two remarkable or outstanding points to have mentioned. First, the number of the victims who submitted their forms and opinions to the ICC was really high. I can say in the history of the ICC, it was very unique, and compared to any other situation, the number was really higher. And the second thing, the percentage of the victims who submitted their opinions to the ICC who said yes was also high. Something like 99% of the victims said hi. I think that's a chance for the ICC that has the support of the victims, the survivors, and the witnesses on the ground. And the second opportunity for the ICC is that ICC easily can find victims, survivors, and witnesses in EU countries. Fortunately or unfortunately, due to the conflict, many Afghans have left country and refused to the EU countries. It includes the victims, survivors, and the victims. That's another opportunity for the ICC. In one of my memo to the Office of the Prosecutor, I highlighted this one and tried to put the ICC in contact with some of the Afghan diaspora community around Europe. And the Transitional Justice Coordination Group, which is also active on the ground in Afghanistan, they also supported ICC with putting them in contact with those Afghan diaspora there. And the other chance for the investigation, I believe, is the civil society, Afghan civil society organization. Though their number are limited, but they have a strong commitment. Since 2012, I have remembered that Afghan civil society organization really pushed for having the ICC investigation on the ground. And since the prosecutor Fatou Bensouda submitted her application to the PTC for its authorization, the Afghan civil society is strongly supported and collaborated with the Office of the Prosecutor. Even when the PTC rejected the prosecutor application, the civil society organization submitted amicus to the appeals, to the PTC and also to the appeals chamber, and also helped with some lawyers to find some victims to appeal on behalf of victims before the appeal chamber, which happened for the first time in the history of the ICC. So ICC has some support of the civil society organization on the ground. That's another opportunity for the ICC. And the third, I believe, is the Afghan government. So it's really tricky. So far, the Afghan government has not rejected any kind of cooperation with the ICC. Anytime in war said that Afghan government is ready to do its obligation, which is coming from the Rome Statute and other ICC legal documents. But of course, in the reality, in practice, the Afghan government acted differently. But at least we have some kind of official words of staying in line with the Rome Statute from the Afghan government. This could be the opportunities, or I can also add it that except Israel, none of the international recognized states who are also state members to the ICC, including those who has military presence in Afghanistan, has not supported or have not supported the US position against the ICC. That is also a kind of chance or opportunity in the future that ICC can gain some support from them, especially when it comes to the arrest or in terms of investigation to collect information or evidence against the perpetrators. However, the challenges could be much more if we are going to list, but I'm going to just mention some of them. In Afghanistan, we have an amnesty law, which gives immunity to anyone who committed crimes, war crimes, and crimes against humanity since 1978. It also included those perpetrators who committed crimes after or since 1 May 2003, or possibly who are going to commit these crimes in the future. Unfortunately, we have this law still in force. That's a big challenge. And the second one is Afghanistan is still in conflict. And it's really difficult for the ICC investigator to travel around the country, especially those places that the incidents have been happened, or have access to the witnesses and victims who are living in insecure area. So that would be difficult. And the third one is actually a legal challenge again. Based on my knowledge, whenever ICC is going to start a full investigation in a situation, there should be a kind of an agreement should be signed between the ICC and the state, which is providing immunity to the ICC staff and somehow force the host state to be in charge of providing security for the ICC staff who are coming on the ground. Unfortunately, this document has not been signed yet between the ICC and the Afghan government, which I really encourage Afghan government to sign that with the ICC. And the fourth, of course, the involvement of US in the case is also another challenge. That's something really obvious. We have heard a lot from John Bolton, from Pompeo, and now from the President Trump. They are really challenging the ICC investigation towards Afghanistan. So the lists are going longer. I would like to stop here.
Thank you so much for that. Especially thank you for highlighting the dynamic between the ICC and the people and the government of Afghanistan. But you mentioned the US relationship to the ICC, and for that I'd like to ask Jennifer if you can describe the US relationship to the ICC, and specifically how the US has responded to the ICC investigation being opened on Afghanistan.
Yeah, thank you for that question. As discussed, there are a lot of challenges regarding doing the Afghanistan investigation, and the US, at least currently, seems very much inclined to add to those challenges. So the US relationship to the ICC has very much fluctuated among administrations. The Clinton administration sent a war crimes ambassador, a negotiating team to Rome, and they participated. US did not sign the statute. However, on the last day it was open for signature, the US did sign. Under the Bush administration, we basically have a four-pronged attack on the ICC. First is, quote, unsigning this from the statute. I do air quotes because the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties doesn't provide for this, but there is a footnote in the list of states parties that the US sent a note withdrawing its signature. There are the peacekeeper immunity resolutions for 2 years. Peacekeepers from non-states parties under Security Council Resolution 1422 and 1487 were exempt from ICC jurisdiction, but those have since expired. There was also a campaign to get these, what the NGO community calls bilateral immunity agreements, passed. So about 100 countries around the world have agreed to never turn over US nationals to the court. There was also some very anti-ICC legislation passed, remnants of which are still on books. First, the American Service Member Protection Act, although subject to certain waivers, and has had some amendments. The relationship certainly improved under the Obama administration, where the US had constructive engagement on a case-by-case basis. But case-by-case basis did allow the US to decide whether to support individual cases. During the Obama administration, the US was actually supportive of ICC cases. Of course, the Afghanistan situation wasn't really moving forward in that time period. So where we've seen recent hostility is obviously during the current administration. Early on, remarks of John Bolton, President Trump, Michael Pompeo against the court. These manifested a year ago, last spring, in the prosecutor's visa being taken away, travel bans against the prosecutor. This past spring, 2 other ICC staff were named, and of course it's culminated in this recent executive order, which calls the ICC a national security threat and imposes sanctions, imposes asset freezes, and it's, while it has broader language, it appears particularly targeted at ICC staff who are involved in the Afghanistan situation or situations involving US allies who are non-state parties, which I think we believe is a reference to Israel. It's also a travel ban, and here it extends not only to ICC staff, but to their families. And I think it's extremely overbroad and, of course, troubling to threaten professional staff of a judicial institution in this way and to single them out. It has also very, very broad provisions that potentially could cover US nationals who render services to the ICC. So it is an extremely broad and troubling order, and this is where we are currently. It is worth noting, of course, that the US does have elections coming up. And I think 4 more years of the current president would mean 4 more years of the executive order. Should we have a change of administration, this would, hopefully the executive order would be reversed, but I don't kid myself that the US would be helpful regarding investigation of US nationals. Actually, I think it's still precluded under this earlier legislation. Just to be realistic, even under the Obama administration, the US has supported where the US has chosen to support, and I believe current legislation prohibits it from actually, giving any kind of active support. Perhaps the current threat level would diminish under a new administration, or we could only hope so. And I think it's a very long-term proposition for the US to finally, as a country, reach the state that these kinds of atrocity crimes prosecutions aren't just for the nationals of other countries. And the US must be subject to the same rule of law standards. And I think while there is widespread support in the US among the population for the ICC, there are some opinion surveys suggesting a fair measure of support. I think there is a certain level of maturation that perhaps has not occurred in the US in terms of looking at US accountability. And this has been very difficult, making ground roads within the US, and the ICC is obviously hitting these impediments as well.
Thank you for shedding light on that. Thanks for, with the current administration, we've seen a very hostile attitude toward like a weakening of multilateral organizations, the sort of hostile attitudes toward the WHO, pulling out of the Human Rights Council, and now, of course, the ICC. But I think you really mentioned an important point by putting it in context of not just the current administration, but a longer history of the US relationship to the ICC. I'd like for a moment to know how organizations like the CICC, the Coalition for the ICC, and other organizations try to combat or draw attention to the challenges that are posed, whether by the, for instance, by the US in this kind of investigation.
Yeah, we have actually seen kind of a consolidation of voices in opposition to the current US position. It starts with the ICC itself. We've had statements from the president of the ICC Assembly of State Parties and from the ICC itself. We have had statements by states, both individual states, and then I know after the prosecutor's briefing to the Security Council on the Darfur situation, there was a statement by 10 states in strong support of the International Criminal Court. So it is possible that the current position will actually galvanize support for the court. In the US, we've had a number of bar associations speak out: the New York City Bar Association, the Philadelphia Bar Association, the American Bar Association, We've had individual NGOs speak out, and there's also a sign-on letter against the current executive order by a large number of civil society. We even have individuals speaking out. I noticed U.S. first war crimes ambassador David Sheffer blogging. Clint Williamson and Steve Rapp was on BBC. I think the ICC president was on Christian Amanpour's show. David Crane, Sierra Leone special prosecutor, and all of this I think matters as well. So I think we've seen many voices, and we need more voices. We need, hopefully, right now I think we have a statement by 10 of the Security Council states, but hopefully other states will be weighing in as well in support of the International Criminal Court.
Thank you for that. For a moment, I'd like to ask Ehsan how the politicization of the ICC might manifest in Afghanistan and whether that would impact its work on the ground. We're also talking in light of US involvement.
Sure, it's really interesting question, but also very complicated one. You know about the role of US in Afghan politics since Cold War era. Afghanistan was actually one of the biggest battlefield during the Cold War era. And US, from that time, US was strongly involved in the politics and whatever was happening on the ground in Afghanistan. First, with support of US and Khalij countries, US supported Mujahideen groups who were fighting against Swedes in Afghanistan. And then for a short period when the Taliban somehow emerged and fighting Mujahideen in Afghanistan, US pulled out or somehow undercut its relationship with the Mujahideen groups and also with the Taliban. But after 9/11 terrorist attacks, the US directly militarily intervened in Afghanistan, which caused to the collapse of the self-claimed government of the Taliban. And in 2001, somehow has the biggest role in the shaping of the new regime in Kabul. So in Afghanistan, everyone somehow believed that whatever is happening in Afghanistan, there is a footstep or the hand of US is behind that. You know, the conspiracy theory is also very active here. Even Afghans believe that the US supporting the Taliban at the same time supporting the Afghan government. So behind the Afghan conflict, the real hand who is pushing the both sides is the US. I cannot say it's true or wrong. That's the belief at least some of the Afghans has or have. So what I'm going to say is that the US force or position against the ICC has direct impact on the public mind in Afghanistan, which means that if the ICC or other international organization, for example, you named CICC, they do not come in support of the ICC and somehow come with a strong outreach to the Afghan to explain what exactly the ICC is and how the US threat could impact the ICC, I'm afraid that the Afghan, even who supported the ICC in December 2017 and January 2018, could dare to stand against the US and Afghan government supporting the ICC. So this is really important. And of course, it is also somehow the Afghan reality that the Afghan government is strongly influenced by the US in terms of military, in terms of civil service, in terms of supporting, financially supporting the Afghan administration at all. So if the US does not somehow come down for the Afghan government would be also difficult to have a real and strong cooperation with the ICC in the future. And without support of the Afghan government, ICC does not have much staff, especially does not have police. For them, it would be really difficult after completion of the investigation. They can arrest those suspects who found responsible according to the possible investigation of the ICC in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So in terms of the ICC's basic abilities to carry out its work, like let's say it's not very effective without the support of the Afghan government. I'd like to ask about funding, the impact of funding on ICC work. And perhaps, Jennifer, you could tell us about the degree that financial pressure might interfere with
before Jennifer.
Oh, would you like to yeah?
Before Jennifer take the floor, can I add a point? Yeah. I just realized it's worth to mention that there are bilateral agreements between the Afghan government and the US, and also Afghan government with NATO. When the Afghan government got the membership of ICC in 2003, so the US government and the NATO, which was called that time International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, they signed separately a bilateral agreement with the Afghan government, which in the agreement, the Afghan government agreed that will not prosecute or will not hand it over to the third party with the purpose of prosecution. I'm the citizen of US and the other nations who came in Afghanistan for military service. These bilateral agreements for many time extended between the parties, and the last one, which is still in force between the US and the Afghan government, is the bilateral security agreement, which also emphasized on not investigating of the US citizen by the Afghan government or handing over them to the third party, which is, of course, like ICC, which I think it's Article 98 of the Rome Statute, which is also somehow give this right to the Afghan government to not supporting the ICC when it violates another international agreement. So based on that, the Afghan government also does not feeling obliged to cooperate with the ICC with handing over the US citizens or helping them, helping the ICC to arrest them or providing information and evidence against them. Yeah, just wanted to add this.
Thank you for that. Yes, so just turning our conversation toward funding. Perhaps, Jennifer, you could tell me about how financial pressure might interfere with the ICC's ability to bring those responsible for war crimes to justice.
Sure, absolutely. Maybe I'll just expand a little bit first on the last remarks. And to comment that the US often says, there's no jurisdiction over US because the US isn't a party. And of course, that's not how the Rome Statute works. That's not how actually basic territorial principles of jurisdiction work. If an American commits murder in Paris, they can be prosecuted in Paris. So, crimes in Afghanistan, so the argument there is no jurisdiction is pretty much specious. The US sometimes also makes these arguments under these bilateral agreements, such as the Status of Forces Agreement. I guess my point is I don't believe an analysis of that means the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction. I think the ICC does have jurisdiction, even considering the Status of Forces Agreement. But if the US has these arguments to make, I would hope that the US would engage in making these arguments and not threaten the court, because if the US thinks it's done complementarity, there's very little indication as far as I can see that the US has done so. But I've sometimes heard, individual individuals from the administration argue the U.S. has done complementarity. I don't know if it's an official U.S. position, but the U.S. should go and make these arguments to the ICC and put forth what it has done in terms of complementarity. If it has any serious jurisdictional arguments to make, then the U.S. simply similarly should engage in making these. But you asked me about funding, and I just wanted to do a reality check that the budget of the court has been under stress in recent years, and I think it goes back to the 2008 financial crisis that some states have insisted on a zero growth budget. And then with the impact of COVID, I could imagine this year's budget negotiations being even more difficult. So the prosecutor isn't able to pursue all of the situations she would want to pursue, and it's simply limitations of budget. And I think we also have to reflect that the ICC, as far as we can see, prosecutes a very few number of cases in each situation country, and this has to be a reality check. If you look at all of the past ICC work, it's just not that in-depth. That's not how the court is set up to function. Afghanistan cases are possible, or when Afghanistan cases are possible, it wouldn't really be that many. I mean, it's just not how the court is funded. And I think this could leave victims very, very disappointed. But I think it highlights the importance of other transitional justice and justice efforts in Afghanistan or for Afghanistan, because I think this might be a situation where one has to be creative and pursue justice abroad. I remember the Liberian Truth Commission. I was amazed to see that they were taking testimony in Staten Island, because a lot of Liberians were in Staten Island. And I wonder, in terms of Afghanistan, whether we don't need new creative approaches, but there really needs to be additional justice and transitional justice efforts, because we have to realize, if the ICC is able to this is a situation with large numbers of crimes, large numbers of victims, and a large number will be disappointed if they're only waiting for the ICC. Then, to get a couple Afghanistan cases, it would be good to face the reality that, what the ICC can do will be limited, and there will need to be complementary efforts.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. Let's just for a moment go back to what both of you just mentioned before, and Ehsan, on the collaboration of the Afghan authority and how this might impact the investigation in light of the ongoing...
Oh, sorry. Can I just make a quick point?
Yes.
I just wanted to respond quickly to Jennifer's point about other transitional justice efforts. So there are many transitional justice efforts that are underway in Afghanistan, and the advocates and people who have been working around the issue of the ICC are well aware of the limited nature of what the ICC intervention would look like. And so the efforts are really to help the Afghan people understand what the limited nature of that is. And so those things will all be underway. But just to give you a sense of some of the work that the amazing advocates are doing on the ground, one of my and Ehsan's colleagues, Hadi Marifort, has started a program called the Memory Box Museum, where people bring in pieces of the history of their family members who have been lost. And there are entire museums on this subject. There are organizations in Afghanistan on the ground who are working forensics issues of how to work around and deal with mass graves. There are colleagues of ours who have a day of remembrance in December where all the advocates get together and remember the people that have been lost. Peace activists are a huge part of the negotiations that are going on the ground right now. There are surveys. So it is very much a multifaceted approach. My colleagues in Kabul, Ehsan Qaane being one of the main people who's doing a lot of the leading on this, they're tremendously sophisticated in looking at transitional justice models and applying them, and understanding sort of where the ICC fits in that framework. So I think that goes to Ehsan's point of just saying, this is how it might actually play out, but very much there's a lot going on the ground.
Thank you so much for that. Perhaps you'd like to expand from that and to provide some Afghanistan context in terms of the experience of the people in regard to collaboration of the Afghan authorities and the ongoing reconciliation with the Taliban by the US and the Afghan government. Nasrina?
Sure. Just to that point, I'll touch on it briefly. I think Ehsan probably has a better analysis on this than I do. But the preamble of the Rome Statute says that ultimately the goal is to combat impunity and to prevent recurrence of violence. And the Office of the Prosecutor puts itself forward as saying that it wants the most serious crimes to not go unpunished. So Afghanistan is basically a case study for this, right? So this is a situation where we do have this level of impunity and we do have ongoing violence. Just to give the folks watching this a sense, in late March, insurgents attacked a Sikh Gurdwara, killing dozens of people, including executing a 3-year-old girl in front of her father. In May, we had insurgents attack a hospital in Kabul where they went through the hospital, went through different wards, and were targeting a maternity ward where they killed new mothers and executed infants, newborns who hadn't even seen the light of day yet. So this is what the ICC was created for. The ICC puts itself forward as wanting to challenge impunity and to help end recurrence of violence. Afghanistan is bleeding. It's been bleeding for a very long time. People understand the limited nature of its role, but this is its role.
I think that's a very poignant statement to make, and thank you for saying this. Maybe Ehsan would like to expand on some of this question. Oh, hold on, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Related to the ongoing peace talks, I cannot say reconciliation at this moment. Peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban, and between the US and the Taliban, and its impact on the ICC investigation, and also in light of what Nasrina Jan said. ICC is the last resort of ending impunity, as it's said in the Rome Statute. And exactly it is related to Afghanistan. When we are talking about providing justice for the Afghan war victims, the history of Afghan conflict shows that whoever committed war crimes or crimes against humanity, they always fully enjoyed impunity. And the Afghan legal system does not have that ability to handle this matter. And what is going on right now related to peace in Afghanistan, I can surely say that there are some improvement in talks between the intra-Afghan dialogue between the Afghan government and the Taliban, but there is still no guarantee that when the talks would be started or when the talks would have real impact in a decrease of violence in the country. According to the reports, the Afghan government and the Taliban agreed to start their first negotiation at the end of this month or beginning of July in Doha. However, based on the reality I knew from both sides, the delegation of both sides are not really ready. In Afghanistan, after a long dispute, election result dispute between President Ehsan Qaane and his rival Abdullah and President Ghani signed an agreement, and based on that agreement, now Abdullah is the head of National Reconciliation Council, which is in charge of handling talks between the Taliban. And based on the agreement, he has to establish his council and somehow find the member of his council, but it has not happened yet. And based on the agreement, this High Council is the right body to make the agenda for the negotiation team. When the High Peace Council is not shaped yet, who is really giving agenda to the negotiation team? That's not really according to the reality that Afghan negotiation team is ready to start negotiation with the Taliban at the end of this month. However, whatever is going to happen in the negotiation, it is also not any guarantee that when this negotiation would come to an end or with an achievement to sign an agreement between the two parties. And there is a high chance that even that agreement would be signed between the two parties, there would not be a chance to really address the justice for victims, because both sides are somehow accused of commission of crimes against the civilians, against the people of Afghan nation. So based on the history of Afghan conflict and signing peace agreement or peace talks, there is a chance that these peace talks would take a long time, and there would be even an agreement signed between the two parties. There's no guarantee that the both parties would stand on their agreement. There is always a chance to collapse after the agreement, like what happened between Mujahideen and Dr. Najibullah, the last Afghan communist president. And there is also no chance that these parties by themselves come to an agreement that define a justice mechanism. Therefore, I really encourage our colleagues to somehow push the Afghan government and the Taliban to come on an agreement, at least to provide some kind of truth and justice for the victims.
Thank you for that. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today and for making such valuable contributions to the discussion. We're almost out of time, but if any one of you would like to make a final point on any of the things we've discussed today.
I would like to make a small clarification about what I said about the agreement signed between the Afghan government and the US and Afghan government with the NATO. When I'm saying that in the agreement, Afghan government agreed to not help ICC to arrest or to find evidence against the US citizens, it does not mean that this agreement also means that ICC does not have jurisdiction over the US citizens. I think it's really clear, everyone knows that whoever committed crimes on the territory of Afghanistan as a state party, regardless to their nationality, they are allegedly responsible before the ICC based on the documents ICC collected related to Afghanistan situation.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you. So I'd just like to end on the note that perhaps just reinstate what Nasrina said, that Afghanistan is bleeding and that this is what the ICC was created for. So again, thank you all for coming, and it was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.